Hi, welcome to Relish Books. Today I'm talking about The End of the Affair by Graham Greene. This is the first Graham Greene novel I have read. He has a ton. Titles that were most familiar to me were Our Man in Havana and The Heart of the Matter. But I read this one first because of something that I heard somebody on Instagram say about it that just excited my curiosity. It was like a passing comment. It was not a full review. I try to avoid listening to reviews of things before I read them because I want my perspective and my thoughts to be my own. I'm pretty easily influenced, and then I'll have what other people said in my mind as I'm going into a book, which I don't like. I really like listening to reviews more after the fact, but I do love recommendations. But what this man said was that he felt like this book was the best book he'd ever read, contrasting human love and God's love. And I thought that sounded really interesting and very much not what you would expect from a book with this title. So, I read it and I'm really glad I did. It was super interesting. I've never read anything quite like it. Again, what it actually ends up being about is so different from what you would think when you start reading it. It was pretty fascinating. The writing was also fantastic. I definitely want to read a lot more of his work. There's so much you could talk about with this book. I feel like there is just everything about it would be great for discussion. I think it would be so interesting to discuss it with people from kind of all different beliefs to see how they felt about it and reacted to it. I do think what he said to me I don't think it is the perfect example of that. Like this man was saying, the perfect example of God's love and human love, because it doesn't really explore faith. He keeps the story to these people's to the characters' personal experiences and their immediate thoughts and their immediate actions and what's going on with them, rather than really diving into that and exploring that. You know that the characters are exploring that a bit, but you don't really see it. And there are a few really great key arguments and moments that make this book thought-provoking and special in that regard, but I don't think it's like the best book to read as like a defense of faith. It's more like a super interesting experience from these people. So anyway, there's so much you could talk about with what's going on in the book. I'm just going to give my quick thoughts, kind of keep it as basic as possible. What it's really about, the main problem and the main conflict that the main character, Bendrix, is dealing with is that of hatred. It's a book about hatred that's actually also a book about love and a book about unbelief that's really about belief, because he's trying so desperately to hate. He's trying as hard as he can to fill himself with hate because he wants to be free of the love that he has. He's trying to hate as hard as he can to convince himself that he doesn't love. He's trying to convince that his love is actually hatred. And alongside of that, as he's dealing with that in regards to the woman, Sarah, who he's in love with, trying to convince himself that he hates her so he won't feel that way anymore and he won't have to deal with everything that's going on in his life in that way. And he's also at the same time, in a connected way, desperately resisting his belief in God and being terrified as he kind of has to confront this over and over, that as he's trying to hate, he realizes, he can't hate something that he doesn't believe in. And the realization of that, his realization over and over that he tries to suppress and push away, that he actually does believe, because you can't hate something you don't believe in. If you genuinely believe something does not exist, you don't believe in the existence of that, you would feel total indifference. So even while he's trying to hate, that also frightens him, because he realizes that his hatred is connected to his love, and it's also connected to his belief, and he's trying to deny those things, and it's, not working. It was a really interesting perspective too, because of the point of view, and I really want to make a video talking about point of view in books, because it affects storytelling so much. And in general, I prefer, as a reader, I prefer the third person. Third person limited is like my favorite perspective overall. But when a book is in first person, you get some special insight and perspectives, and it can make things difficult, because you are getting the story from the point of view of the character telling it to you, and they might not be, especially in this kind of setting where he's telling it like a narrative, he's telling it like he's writing down the story for you, and you realize that when you're getting all the facts from this character, you're getting it only from their side and their perspective, and they might not even be being honest. Things that they tell you would probably be very different if another person in the story were to tell you. And with this character, even with Bendrix, it's like he's trying to convince himself as he's writing the story, and he's trying to convince you that things are a certain way that they're not, and people are certain ways that they're not, and that he himself is a certain way that he's not. And so then when you get partway through the book, you get some perspective from the woman, and you see a different side of him that he hadn't shown you, because he's trying to present himself as being, this man who's so full of hate. And then you see a little bit from her perspective, and you see a different side of him. You see a more truthful, I could say, but also her perspective, who you could say is also biased. So you have to try to piece together what these people are actually like and who they really are, by reading between the lines a little bit. Which is really interesting. I do wish the book had explored certain themes a little bit more, but I understand why he didn't get into that, because it wasn't what it was about. I thought it was really interesting, the character of Smythe, who is this man whose whole work is to argue against the arguments for the existence of God. And as she's starting to have belief, to have faith, she's like going to him, hoping to be convinced out of her faith, and how passionately he's arguing against these arguments actually convinces her, or helps to convince her of the existence of God, which is a really interesting thought and idea, and just the way that that's presented so simply and kind of just in passing, because the book doesn't really go into that a lot, but I felt like it was done really well. Kind of this kind of an eye-opening moment, how you're like, oh, I see that perspective. Because even this man, if he genuinely didn't believe, why is he so passionate in his unbelief? Why isn't he just indifferent? And it's actually a result of kind of what the main character is going through. It's actually a belief, but a belief filled with hatred that he's professing as unbelief. So there's a lot that could be unpacked in that. The book definitely has Catholic leanings, and there's some moments that I felt like kind of hurt the rational side of the story, with some almost like supernatural stuff going on in the present day, kind of these like little miracles that happen that just didn't, to me, again, it would be interesting to talk about it with to discuss it, but I felt like with what the book was trying to say, the perspective that it was trying to give, those things I feel like actually hurt it more than helped it, in my opinion. And were also just unnecessary to the story. I felt like the story was just fine without kind of those embellishments, those added things. All that to say, though, it is really interesting. Definitely a worthwhile read. It's not very pleasant. There's a lot of, it's not pleasant subject matter, but it's interesting. It was worthwhile. And again, so unexpected to realize what the book's actually about when you start reading it and you think it's just the story of, a love story of this affair and unhappy lovers and all that. On that note, it does have some, obviously the subject matter is dealt with pretty well. There's nothing really explicit. You do see he talks about some private things, some intimate things, but it's never, in the moment, it's never super descriptive. It's never graphic. I felt I could read it without being really uncomfortable. You know what's going on, but it's not really explored. That's not what it's about. It's definitely not described, like in a graphic way. So that is in there. It kind of has to be in there with what the whole story is about. But I still felt like it was a very worthwhile and thought-provoking read. If you read it, let me know what you think. Let me know what other Graham Greene novels you would recommend. Because, I definitely will be reading some more soon. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.